You're listening to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast. I'm here today with Paul. Hey Paul, how's it going?
Hello dear, it's going well. How are you?
Oh, I'm pretty excited actually. We have a special guest on today who is a former full-stack web developer and UX multitasker and a current lead programmer at Transolar Games that is currently working on Summer Daze at Hero U and has also recently submitted a little game called Chosen One into AdventureJam 2020. Let me welcome Cidney Hamilton. Hey Cidney, how's it going?
Hey Anna, that's a very flattering intro.
It's good to be on the show. Happy to have you here. So I guess that is mainly what you've been spending most of your time on, working with Summer Daze at Hero U. Now, that's a game made by Transolar Games, and that's an indie game studio that was founded by somebody that many of us know, and that's Laurie and Corey Cole, creators of the Quest for Glory series.
Yes. So Transolar Games was founded right when they were doing the School for Heroes web game, and after a while, they decided to actually make a video game. Originally, they were just going to do a text adventure, but then decided they wanted graphics. So Hero U was kickstarted. I was originally a backer. Around that time, I was starting to get pretty disillusioned with web development and was learning Unity programming on the side, and then saw that they needed additional programmers. I reached out to Corey. We talked. I was originally just going to work something like, 10, 20 hours a week on the project in addition to some freelance work. Mm-hmm. But as Hero U progressed, I got a lot more involved, in part because it was pretty close to not actually shipping. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've been their lead developer. So Summer Daze, I'm the only programmer. There's 2 artists that are still working on it. It's a much smaller project and is much more focused on pure story rather than combat or game mechanics. So
yeah, it's a beautiful game. So you have a smaller team now. How many people would you say that you work with on a daily or weekly basis?
Just 5. There's the Coles and the 2 artists, JP Selwood and Ali Frazio, who is also a Sierra alum.
Mm-hmm. That's a great team. And I guess Laurie and Corey you must be in contact with them fairly regularly too. Do you guys do meetings fairly frequently?
We have regular Tuesday meetings over Google Hangouts, but we mostly talk via Slack or IRC. And Corey also is very active in our Discord server.
Wow, so everybody has to really be technologically on board. That's pretty cool. And I'm guessing none of you really live that close to each other either.
It's actually a lot better now. On Hero U, the other lead developer was in New Zealand, so meetings were pretty hard to schedule. So now we're at least all on the same continent.
Oh, that's good.
So to start from the beginning, Cidney, did you how did you get into programming, and did you specifically want to go in for games, or was it just more of a general programming that you were getting into?
So I think, like a lot of the people you've interviewed, I grew up playing Sierra Adventure games and thought games were really cool and kind of vaguely wanted to make my own. However, at around the same time, I got active on the Sierra message boards, was doing online role-playing, and back in the late 90s, the web was very new and very esoteric, and I started making my own websites and was really excited about that. And the thing that interested me the most was multiplayer role-playing. So the first game I actually did was for a senior thesis in high school. It was technically an MMO. It was entirely play-by-post. I had several moderators, pretty comprehensive world, and it was mostly storytelling based. I had no idea how to monetize it and didn't really want to, because these people were my friends and it was something that I was doing for fun. And when I got to college, there was this new similar website called Facebook that was becoming a lot more popular, and I didn't find that any fun. People were posting really boring things there. But after a while, Web 2.0 took off and people kind of lost the attention span for long-form writing, Storium is actually the project that's the closest to what I did, in that it's a pure narrative-based gaming system where you can do interactive stories with groups of, say, 4 or 5. But initially, I mean, the technologies that interest me were web-based, but I was always interested in games and programming as a way to facilitate gaming and storytelling. Mm-hmm. I didn't get into the game industry for a while, mostly because, I mean, right when I was in college, the games that were coming out were really boring. Adventure games were over, and I wasn't really interested in, Diablo 3 or any of the AAAs that were coming out. And it wasn't until, the indies took off and a lot of the Sierra developers were doing their own Kickstarters that I started thinking, hey, maybe making games would be more interesting.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of curious, what were some of your favorite childhood games or games that you grew up on? I've heard you mention Sierra and Adventure a lot, so I'm guessing you're quite fond of some of the old Sierra games?
So the first game I played was King's Quest IV. My father actually got it for me to teach me how to type, since the parser mechanic was pretty critical then. I loved Quest for Glory when I played it. I didn't play Gabriel Knight until probably my early 20s, but if I had to pick one, that's probably my favorite Sierra game.
Nice, me too. Maybe. That'll change tomorrow, but right now it is.
If I act fast, I'll be in my early 40s when I finally play Gabriel Knight.
Yeah, I really, really want to play it. It is on my list, although I did meet you in the beginning at King's Quest IV. That was also my first game. Mm-hmm.
So do you have a particular preference for the parser versus the point-and-click interface when it comes to gaming? There's a lot of people who do whether it be nostalgia or actually for people who enjoy the actual mechanics of the parser, they're really devout into it, but there's some people who are really much like, no, the point and click is the way to go. Do you have sort of like a side of the battle?
That's an interesting question, and I think they're both good for different things. The parser is really good for exploration and puzzle solving, but if you're doing a more character-centered game, it's really hard to do meaningful dialogue with the parser. Even the early King's Quest games, you really didn't talk to the NPCs very much. There wasn't much, character development.
Right.
And it wasn't until I want to say Quest for Glory 4 that I really saw Sierra games having really interesting character interactions and storylines that were driven by dialogue trees. Mm-hmm. You just can't do dialogue trees with a parser. I've written text adventures. I've tried to do it. You have to anticipate everything the player might say, and it's not really feasible.
Right.
There are some interesting AI experiments that do that, but if you want to have a character-driven game, you can't just have it be parser.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's interesting. You mentioned that you've tried your hand at text adventures. I recently was introduced to a program called Inform. Are you familiar with that? Is that what you used?
I've used Inform. I've used some other programs too, but I worked on an Inform 7 game for IF Comp a few years back, and probably played around with making my own parsers when I was a kid.
Was there a part of you that ever considered, were you always kind of decidedly going to head into the programming side of gaming, or was there a part of you that was curious as to the art or storytelling as well?
Oh, not at all. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a writer, and I just kind of taught myself programming incidentally to tell interactive stories. But
that's cool. What got you into writing then?
I was dictating stories and making up stories from when I was probably 1 or 2 years old. So I don't even really remember.
Yeah, do you have any one thing
the standard experience of I read books, I like books, let me make my own books.
Right.
Oh, I like their interactive books, let me make those too. Oh, I have to learn how to program for that, let me do that. Oh, this is actually a really marketable skill. That's cool. I'm about to graduate from college and I need to figure out how to survive. Let me go with that.
Yes.
Well, being that you were already programming so early and then you ended up starting college early as well at about age 16, did you already know the direction that you were going to go into education-wise?
So I was actually, I think my intended major was comparative literature or something. But it wasn't until I got to college that I realized that English classes were really boring and computer science classes were a lot more fun. The school I went to also had a really great computer science department, which may have helped.
Mm.
So did you finished out your degree in computer sciences and then you went into the tech sector immediately? Were you did you have to go out hunting or did they come hunting for you? How did it work?
I think I put my resume on LinkedIn sometime before I graduated and got spammed with recruiters. So I guess they came hunting for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had also been doing freelance web development from back right when I started college, so
connections,
decent amount of experience there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as Anna mentioned, you took part in the Adventure Game Jam. Was that was this year, right?
Yeah.
It was at so did you have a small team or was it just you or?
I think I went into it with completely different goals than everyone else did. I've been wanting to do Ludum Dare for a while, but because I have a chronic illness, I wasn't sure that I could handle a 48-hour game jam. So I was like, oh, there's a game jam coming up that's 2 weeks and I can make an adventure game. That sounds like good practice. But my goal was to do all of the assets myself, including things that I had zero experience in. So, like, I composed the music for that game. I've never written a song in my life.
Oh, wow.
So it was very handmade and from scratch, and clearly not competitive with the really very polished final results that people were doing.
How was the Adventure Jam experience? Like, well, how? Because I used to take part in 48-hour filmmaking festivals, and they were pretty quite the wild ride. So I can't even like picture having to make a game in a very limited amount of time, because that's just like that's beyond my comprehension.
It's honestly not so bad, because when you're making a game, you're for Game Jam, you're usually using some kind of framework, so you're not actually writing the systems code from scratch. I didn't write a single line of code for Game Jam.
Oh, okay.
Just doing it. I used a Unity program called Adventure Creator that has its own visual scripting system.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very cute. You know, I mean, every part of me I don't want any spoilers, but I will just say I wanted to see more. I wanted to see the next step. Of course, it left me feeling like it was going to be an interesting journey.
Yeah, well, part of the appeal of the Game Jam was the deadline meant I couldn't go back and be like, wow, this art really sucks. I'm gonna, try to get it perfect before I get it in. But now that it's over, I'm actually working on a patch where I go back and redo all the art, so everything has the same pixel grid. The rooms actually have decent perspective. And yes, it was intended as the prologue for a longer game if I felt up to it, but hopefully it stands on its own.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. It had a nice mood to it. I mean, it was anticipation, but it was also a little bit scary, but there was also, ready to wield power, and it had a lot of feelings in it for a shorter game.
Some of that was, Summer Daze is very much a family-friendly game, and all of the Quest for Glory games really are, and I kind of wanted to do something that was a bit darker, and this gave me an outlet to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of would think that you probably didn't get a whole lot of sleep in them 2 weeks, considering you had to, learn how to and compose your own music and do the art. I mean, that sounds like a marathon.
It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. The way I approached it was kind of very much like an engineer. Like, I had minimum viable product and what is the minimum amount of work I need to do it, and then planned on spending the rest of the time polishing and iterating. Mm-hmm. But as it turned out, once I actually had the game working, I was exhausted and didn't quite get all those other extra features in. For instance, there's no save game system. There's a lot of stuff that I deferred because it was optional that I didn't end up doing. And at least following the other people on Discord, a lot of people approached it by doing the art first and then spending like the last few days frantically trying to fix bugs and getting everything together. Whereas I planned on fixing all the bugs like a week before I shipped it. So
right.
I'm actually really excited about doing it again next year now that I know what to expect.
Yeah, there's a scary anticipation about the first time and a lot of wondering, and there's a certain confidence that comes with doing something the second time for sure. So I'm looking forward to seeing your entry in next year's.
The other thing was for a while, I wasn't even sure if I was going to submit it or submit. I definitely wasn't planning on submitting under my real name. I probably made this mistake of telling Roberta, who is our marketing person and probably a very ardent Quest for Glory fan, and she tweeted about it. So by that point, I was committed.
Now it's happening. Oh, that's great. So you must have had some role models growing up. I'm guessing some of the women in the industry might have encouraged you to go in this direction. Is that true? People like Roberta Williams, maybe, Christy Marks, Lori, who you're with now, Jane Jensen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because there were so many female Sierra designers, it took me a long time to realize that was unusual.
Yeah, I feel you there. I mean, even outside of that, I didn't realize that it wasn't a thing that girls did or didn't play computer games. I just thought it wasn't a thing that kids my age played computer games. So that was the way that I saw it as split. Did you know many people growing up that played computer games?
I really didn't until I started. I mean, I started spending time on Sierra Message specifically because it was hard for me to relate to kids my own age and because I wanted to find fans of something similar. So by the time I was 9 or 10, I had a lot of online friends that were very into the same games I was into. Mm-hmm. But as a little kid, nobody understood what I was talking about.
No, I feel that outside of my family anyways, that people were just like, oh, you play games on the computer. That's fun. Do you want to watch? No, that's okay.
Yeah, it was always like, oh, I didn't know Mario Brothers was on the PC too. It's not.
It's Mario Paint. Is that not the same? That's pretty cool. So you grew up with a father that was an aerospace engineer, and he's had some pretty hefty connections. Did that sort of influence the types of systems that you had growing up? It must have.
Yeah, definitely. It was, I mean, his computer and his internet connection and his technology that I was using early on. So, I mean, I guess there were other kids that had internet access, but it was a lot more primitive.
Yeah, because he'd have to have the top of the line to do the stuff that he was doing, complicated mathematical things, and
yeah, it almost sounds like a lot of pressure, like having a father that's that well achieving.
I forget offhand if he learned at least some programming in college. He went to MIT in the 60s and dropped out to work on the Apollo program, and then
wild.
When I was growing up, we were around Cape Canaveral, so he was doing something pretty different then. But I think he definitely saw that learning how to program is good. I'm going to make sure my kid has access and resources to do this. He didn't specifically teach me how to program, but he got me a lot of books, and I was able to teach myself, and definitely encouraged me in that direction.
That's pretty cool. Did they have NASA picnics and stuff?
Not really. So my father was never technically a NASA employee. He was always an independent contractor. I think at some point right now directly for NASA. But from what I understand, the corporate environment there was kind of competitive and.
So they weren't all holding hands and having picnics. It was a bit more tense than that. Lots of cutting edge technology and secrets and things.
A lot of negotiating contracts and getting fired, and also the Columbia disaster happened when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was really somewhat involved in that.
Oh yeah, I guess so. That one would have hit you much harder than a lot of the rest of us just watching it on TV. I understand being sort of in the middle of it there.
Yeah, I think my dad was friends with at least one of the people who died.
Oh wow!
Or at least maybe not close, but vaguely knew them.
I mean, the whole world kind of felt they were close with a lot of the people on that mission, so I can't imagine.
And I mean, came down to really computer error.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, computers, right? We've learned so much over the last couple of decades. It's really even hard to comprehend some of the technical issues that would have been had back in that time. Now, it's a completely different story. So that's pretty cool. So are you mainly working on Summer Daze at Hero U right now? Do you have any side projects going on now that you've completed the AdventureJam game?
So Summer Daze is, it's been a bit slow because the Coles are doing caretaking for a sick parent during COVID-19. So I am working on some preliminary stuff for a full-length game, and also trying to do the patch for my AdventureJam game and get a bit more proficient with pixel art and pretty much all the entire skill set I would need to do solo projects. I met Francisco Gonzalez at PAX and was really impressed by the idea of one person making a game like Plight City. I mean, it wasn't just him, but it was pretty much him doing the art, animation, programming, everything. Mm-hmm. So I have a point-and-click adventure it would be full-length and is also an adventure RPG. But it's a pretty ambitious project, so I'm not quite comfortable announcing it or talking about timeline.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
I've also been doing some additional freelance web work.
Oh, wow. So a variety of things you can do. I mean, that's the brilliance of being able to work at home nowadays. Once you have those computer skills, you can be wanted anywhere all over the world for something.
I mean, it does get lonely, but yes. It is nice to be able to work anywhere and potentially internationally.
I would really like a definitive release date for your game that is just in the beginning of creation.
On the record right now.
It'll definitively be released.
Nice. There you go.
In the future.
So all your programming, it sounds like it started almost from web development. I'm curious, like was the roots of its creation within like making like a GeoCities page, like something like that?
It was playing around with, like probably making like some simple C++ games before that. But
oh wow.
Yeah, I had a GeoCities page when I was 12. I bought my own domain names and had my website. The game was called Ashar Online. If you search really hard on Internet Archive, you can probably find it.
I was just going to ask if your GeoCities or the game was on the Wayback Machine. That'd be fun to go look at.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's actually a fan page for it. That's more accessible than the actual game.
I'm going to have to check that out. That's pretty cool. Especially going way back. Do you ever get the feeling that you want to do any changes or put out patches for a game that you made a long time ago, perhaps just to learn or just for fun?
Well, I get paid to put out patches for games I made a long time ago, so
that's beautiful.
Actually, there's an upcoming Hero U Road Redemption patch that's probably coming out once we get the German translation in, so I'm going to be supporting that for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other genres outside of adventure that you would be interested in working in if the opportunity came up?
Well, I've always been interested in role-playing games primarily. In fact, I'm somewhat of a bad adventure game fan because if there's no interactivity or gameplay, I don't tend to get as engaged in it. So,
right.
Adventure RPGs are kind of the perfect hybrid. They're very time-consuming to make.
Yeah.
Require a lot of balance. But there's actually also an action RPG that I don't know if I'll ever release, but I've prototyped. And there's a platformer I'm working on with Refrazio called Arctic Blast, where you're playing a penguin who is fighting some intrepid humans that are trying to start a mine in the Arctic.
If it's got a penguin, I'll definitely buy a copy of that, if not two.
It's got a penguin. It's a very cute character. It's something that a coworker and I are working on in our spare time, though, and his standards are probably higher than mine. I mean, like, I've been doing the game jams to be like, yeah, I can just make a game in a few days and release it, and he actually wants this to be, reflective of, the quality of games that he's made in the past.
And if you release a patch for it that turns your character into a duck, I'll buy 5 copies for Paul.
Oh, God.
I will hold you to that. And bring that to my
Come on,
list.
don't get on board with that. God. I got so many duck puns I got to deal with every day, Cidney. It's horrible.
Yeah, I believe Steve Alexander is also working on a platformer, so maybe we can release some kind of, adventure game dubs to make a platformers bundle.
That's right. Frog Sheen, he's working on. So, yeah, that's really cool. It's really good to see. I don't know. I guess those are the ones that I grew up with the most personally was adventure and platformers, because that was just like sort of that time, that era of gaming. If it was on consoles, it was a platform. If it was on PC, it was adventures. So, yeah, I'm really excited about the independent scene these days, because it really seems to be catering to my generation of gamers.
Unfortunately, I never grew up with platformers, so I probably find platformers way too hard, and the mechanics and coding are probably way too easy for people that like you. But
I did like how you mentioned the indie scene as if there's any other scene for adventure game fans whatsoever.
Well, technically, the Steam Summer Festival just happened, and adventure was the most popular category, I think, or one of the most popular categories. There are a lot. I mean, because everything is tagged adventure. If there's some kind of story to it.
That's fair. I was explaining adventure games to my oldest son's girlfriend, and I said, it's kind of like the Clue games you like, because she really likes the Clue games. I said, but with a little bit more story and content. She's like, oh, okay. So I threw a few on her computer, and we'll see what she thinks. She's never played one in her life. So
what did you start her out with, Leisure Suit Larry?
No, I gave her King's Quest V, and I gave her Space Quest 4. I don't figure she'll do very well with Space Quest 4, but she'll find it funny for a few minutes, and she might like the King's Quest 5. Do you think there's a game that would be better to start her off with? Maybe do you think I should have done a LucasArts game or something?
I don't think King's Quest 5 has aged well.
But the hand-painted graphics, come on.
The interface was a bit rough.
If
you're going to start with a King's Quest game, probably King's Quest 6.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I just thought maybe, having an owl around might make her want to play games more.
I'm sure puzzles like throwing a pie in a Yeti's face crosses generation gaps.
Well, at the time, it seemed like a great idea.
Intuitive, yes.
You mean like 7 hours later when there was no other ideas left to try in that moment?
So I know your time is valuable in the Mid-City, so I just wanted to check in with you. Are there any shout-outs or anything that you would like to, or any plugs that you like to give just before we wrap up the interview?
Probably Road to Redemption. But
yeah, Hero U.
I don't think there's anything actionable for Summer Daze yet. There's
right.
The demo's on Steam. Wishlist Summer Daze at Hero.
All right, sounds good.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, Cidney. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you as always. And listeners, you heard her go bloody wishlist them games, right? Get Road to Redemption if you haven't already, which you should have. And if not, Summer Daze wishlist that on Steam. It really actually does help the developers, I think, probably, maybe. It's just a button, you can press it.
It does.
See,
it
confirmation,
does,
all right.
Yeah,
press that.
And there's a
thing.
playable demo too, so give it a shot, see what it's like. And
yeah, exactly. Give the demo a go. Press the button. Press it twice. Actually, no, don't press it twice because that'll just undo the first time you pressed it.
Press it 3 times.
Yeah, 1 or 3 times. No more or less. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook. We're the Classic Gamers Guild. We got Instagram at CGG Podcast. We're on Twitter. Do us a tweet if you will at the CG Guild. You can find us on Patreon if you want to bloody chuck in a buck or whatever. And a very special thank you to those in our extra special thanks tier, which will be Jay Holmes, Mark Fillion, and Chad Herman. We thank you lot so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for listening. We love you. Bloody don't do a murder.